Bestiary is back to being relevant since the rework of charms, and I made a video going over the tips I could think of for doing Bestiary better and more efficient, since I was top 1 on my server in charms back in the day, and now I got it back. This video will not go over the tips I already covered then, which you can see on the screen right now. If you want to hear me elaborate on each of them, I highly encourage you to go check part 1 of the Bestiary tips and combine it with this one. But after I made that video, shortly after came a rapid event weekend where I started charming again, and as I did that, I will think of new tips to share. So this part 2 should finish covering everything I consider relevant when it comes to doing bestiary, with a simple one: don't worry about it too much. If you are lower level, this is something that you do on the side, simply by hunting different spawns as you progress. Try to aim for that instead of focusing in one spawn, and you will be grateful in the future. Keep in mind you start getting actual value out of charms at around level 200, other than some minor charms like Fatal Hole, which are pretty useful for low levels. If you are mid-level, then it will depend on the spawn you're hunting, but normally 2 or 3 charms are good to go. And now, because of the charms rework, you can reset your charms and unlock different ones when you move spawns. This is costly in terms of gold, but definitely helpful in the mid-levels where it's not as high, and it helps if you got low charms. And lastly, if you're high level, you can be just fine with the elemental charms and a few extra. Grinding past that is optional. Even though the level 3 charms are a nice addition, it's not a must-have. So if you got the damage charms at level 2, you're pretty much set. Now let's go with perhaps a bit of a controversial tip: to not rely or make plans with other people. Hear me out. It is pretty good to make groups and charm hard creatures. I'm not denying that. My point is that ever since the introduction of the rapid event weekends, the amount of times I have done something with my hunting team during this weekend are very few. And also same goes with making big groups of randoms. Part of the reason is that charming can be boring and time consuming, and most of the times you end up doing 2 or 3 pulls, making it even more boring. And I would say it's more common for people to not like doing that, but they might still try to do it regardless. And then comes the realization that the time required to complete the charm is longer than they thought, and hence they might drop out after an hour, or sometimes they will need less skills than the rest and only come for part of it, leaving you with less people over time and possibly making it harder to complete. So it's better to prepare yourself for that, rather than thinking everyone is going to stay for long sessions and show up for every plan you make. Instead, break it down and make it easier to do. It can just be 1 or 2 hard charms for 50 to 100 points spread out throughout the weekend, for like 1 hour hunt every day. Or narrow it down to a duo hunt, find someone that actually wants to charm just like you, and figure out which creatures you both need. Next up is to update your bestiary tracker regularly. This kinda stacks up with my tip for making plans beforehand on part 1, but I find this more helpful overall. Seeing the creatures you're close to finishing can be a source of motivation, but also a source of creativity. If you don't like making plans, you can just look at what you already have close to finishing and do those. Also, it helps with making different hunts, as you will naturally try out creatures more. And I'm sure there is some benefits to your brain when you see the green bar fill in on the bestiary tracker. Next up is to do a research lab on the spawn, and then come up with at least 2 lab options and try them. A lot of times, the density of creatures varies depending on the pools. In one side, more of a creature A will respawn, and in another room is creature B. Making a lab where you notice these patterns and then perhaps alternating between them will make it so that you finish them more evenly. But also sometimes there is just a better and more efficient lab that you didn't realize about, because you stuck to the first thing you try. This can happen in a lot of places, and one that I think represents this best is the Orc Calls of Eldron. There is 5 creatures here and 3 floors, but in the first floor you only find 4 of them. On the second you get all 5, and then on the third floor you only find 3. You might be tempted to stay in -2 because it has all 5 at the same time, but since the amount of creature varies, you actually want to swap the labs as you get progress in some of them. And together with this tip is to start with rare creatures first. Using the same spawn as example, you can start on -3, get most of the progress on our priest there, and then move out to work on the others. Another one, if you want to charm the Orestes Tomb on the undead version, you want to start on the lower floors because you encounter some of the creatures from the middle floor as well. So while you finish at rare creatures like the Death Priest and Elder Mummies, you will be getting kills on Sacred Spiders, Sandstorm Scorpions, and Grave Guards. Your focus is on the hard creatures, but you get progress on the others at the same time. Another good example is Orc Warlords. There is not an exclusive spawn for them. They come with very few respawn points, but the other orcs you can find in a lot of places and at a high density. However, if you focus on doing the warlords first, like in the Orc Fortress, you will finish some of the other orcs in the process, and even if you don't finish them all in one place, using this same example, by the time you're done with the Orc Warlords, you will be close to finishing Berserkers and Leaders, and you can go to another spawn, and this time the rare creatures will be those. You will complete them while you get the progress on the easy ones like Spearmen and Warriors. But you do need to make the decision beforehand of what goal of charm points you want to have, because in some cases the rare creatures are a lot more time consuming than the others, and it might be tempting to complete the others and leave one out, but you might regret it later if you choose to finish that one. Next up is to go for more raids. In Tibia we have raids every day, and a good amount of them comes with lots of creatures to get progress on Bestiary. For example, the Flamingo Apocalypse can get you the charm in almost one raid. The raid of lizards in the southeast of Port Hope comes with a good amount of snake charms, which are the rare one, and a lot more are useful like that. Another tip is to pick out the tasks for killing in the name of quests. If you still haven't done them, it's a good moment to do so. For example, charming the Medusa Tower is easy points for 3 creatures. Any of the creatures in the list, if you don't have the Bestiary already, is worth picking up before you start charming. And a tip that I also recommended before, to check for the boosted area every day. On the part 1 video, I mentioned this is good enough sometimes to do charms off rapid, and the reason I'm mentioning it again is because it stacks up with a rapid event weekends, so a boosted area will be even faster, and in some cases, with particularly the hard creatures with little respawn points will be more appealing. Like for example, the other types of nomads in the desert. But in order to do that, you must also be checking up the Adventurers Guild daily. This way you can find out what world events are active and some are very useful for charming. Like that nomad example is exclusive during Rapid, but it's not active every time. The Dwarf and Hunter Camp in Port Hope is decent for charming, the Hive of Liberty Base in case the actual hive is closed, the Stampede for Terrified Elephants in Port Hope, as well as the Fury and Ghost Gates, just to name a few. And there is some others that do not show up in the world board, and you can use the NPC guides for some of them, like the State of the Venor Elves to see if they're burning for fire starters, the State of the Demon War, and the Twisted Waters. There is even some that you might need to go check in person, like the Pirate Shipwreck in Kralos. If you find this one active, it's very good for Pirate Corsairs and Buccaneers, which are the most rare pirates to do. And if charm points is not appealing enough, you can use rapid events for making profit or experience. People often overlook the fact that rapid events improves the numbers of any spawn. XP is not to the degree of a double XP event, but it almost always can boost XP by a 10 to 20% in some cases, because you can focus on the best pulls or alternate between two, removing a lot of dead time walking in a full lap. Or optionally, you can go for the creatures that drop rare items and focus on them, like Ogre Shamans and Dwarves for Voodoo Dolls, the Deeplings for the Foxtail, and more. Or not even rare items, just creature products, like for example doing Medusas in the tower for the Medusa Hairs. You don't necessarily need to do the Bestiary where the only reward is the points. If you're missing charms, I'm sure you can do creatures that give XP or loot as well, and this might motivate you to do some of them. Lastly, take breaks. Rapid event weekends is the only time people grind too hard to the point of getting their stamina to 0 in some rare cases, but more commonly people do grind it down to under 20 hours. And that is not necessary. After knowing all of these tips, you should be more efficient with your time and then it gets faster to do charms. I'm gonna use myself as an example. I have never gone down under 14 hours of stamina while still beating others in the Bestiary race multiple times that are doing it. And that was achieved by being smart about it, making plans and taking it easy. I will do 30 minutes or 1 hour at a time, take a break, and possibly do it again or do something else. And this made it easier on me to not get burned out or bored out of my mind. This is definitely different for each person, but I find it very helpful to me, so I am including it as a tip, since at the end of the day, these are tips that come from my own personal experience. And that's all I got for this video. Thank you for watching. I highly encourage you to join my Discord community, as there is a channel there where I post the hunt analyzer for Bestiary hunts, and I encourage others to do it too. That helps to pick up charms to do and be informed on how long they will take. And if you still haven't seen part 1, this is the time to do so.